the farthest any human being has ever drilled into the earth is no more than 7 miles, 40,000 feet. And that was in 1989. And they have not drilled not even 1 inch further since then. So everything stops at that 40,000 foot mark. Not even 1% into the earth. 7 miles. Just 1 mile deeper than the Mariana Trench. This is the deepest that we've ever physically penetrated into the earth. So we've only been able to physically observe less than 1% of what's actually going on inside the earth. And again, everything that we know about the earth's inner structure is based off of the data from seismic waves. And of course, seismic waves are formed from earthquakes. When an earthquake hits, it sends these waves throughout the entire body of the earth. And when these waves move through the earth, they move either as a P wave or an S wave. Now, P waves are going to be known as primary waves because they travel through the earth the fastest. So they're going to be the first waves or the primary waves to move their way through the earth. And then right behind them, you have the S waves, or in other words, the secondary waves, traveling about 60% slower than those P waves. And they use these waves to make assumptions about what is going on inside the earth. Basically, by looking at how these waves pass through objects on the surface. Because again, P waves travel the fastest and they move through liquids, solids, and gases, while S waves are moving slower and can only move through solid objects. Now, to monitor the movement of these waves, they've got these seismic stations strategically placed all over the world. Hundreds of these seismic stations that link together to create this global seismographic network. And through these stations, they're able to monitor where a wave begins, where it ends, and just how long it takes to get from one point to the next. And from that, they're able to determine exactly what type of wave it is. And this is ultimately how we got that picture of the structure of the inner earth that we know today, based off of what can be mapped out using these seismic waves. And again, we know when you send a spherical object similar to the earth into a constant spinning motion, into a constant rotation, and you add an element to the interior of it, that spinning or that centrifugal force creates a cavity or a cylindrical mass at the center of that object that extends to the top and the bottom, or to the north and the south, to the north and the south poles, just like polar openings. And it makes sense. If this is what they found when they got to the North Pole and they got to the South Pole during those early expeditions, why, even after they signed that agreement to never shoot another nuclear missile into space, they still continued to set those nukes off at ground level, underground, for another 29 years straight, almost 3 decades, non-stop. All these different countries all around the world continued to detonate these nuclear bombs underground for 29 years straight. And you got to think, they were setting these things off before they even signed that space ban treaty. They started setting these things off in 1951. And the last underground nuclear test wasn't until 1992. 41 years they were setting these nukes off underground for 4 decades, nonstop. Every single country that had nuclear capability was setting these things off underground. You had thousands of different nuclear tests, and more than 75% were detonated underground. You had over 1,352 underground nuclear detonations. And that's just the ones we know about. So you got these explosions going off underground all over the planet for decades. And from that intense impact within the earth, you're going to get intense movement within the earth, intense waves, long period seismic waves. All that impact from those nuclear blasts creates seismic waves within the earth. And depending on how strong that explosion is, you can actually produce S and P waves from these underground nuclear explosions. Usually in the aftershock after that initial blast, you get S and P waves that come behind it. And of course, the larger the explosion, the more of these waves that get produced. And once these waves are produced, they're able to be recorded and measured and used to map out the interior of the earth and basically produce like a scan of the earth's interior, a crude outline of the interior of the earth from those waves. And normally seismic waves are going to be produced from earthquakes. Again, when an earthquake happens, it releases energy that sends waves throughout the entire body of the earth, depending on the magnitude, how strong that earthquake is. And the average earthquake is going to release 1,000,000 times more energy than one nuclear explosion. Because again, the energy from that earthquake is moving throughout the entire body of the earth. So you have to wait years for that natural phenomena to occur. And then it's completely unpredictable as to when it's going to happen. So you have no control over when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, or how large it's going to be. The amount of energy that's going to be produced from that earthquake. You're relying on nature to take its course and produce those waves. But again, a large enough underground nuclear explosion will produce seismic waves within the earth. And even though one earthquake releases 1,000,000 times more energy than one nuclear explosion, multiple underground nuclear detonations all around the earth can release higher levels of energy and basically simulate a higher magnitude earthquake and create stronger seismic activity that can be measured and mapped and used to create an outline of the interior of the earth. And of course, all of this can be controlled and manipulated through the yield of underground nuclear detonations, which could explain why countries all over the world continue to detonate these nukes underground for 41 years straight, non-stop. That they were trying to produce enough energy that would create waves throughout the entire earth that could be used to measure and map the entire interior of the earth. We know they literally had temporary seismic stations set up in different areas to track and to monitor the waves from these underground explosions. So they're definitely recording these waves and using them for something. And again, it makes sense. If they found large depressions leading down into the deeper interior of the earth at the North Pole and at the South Pole, why they would want to produce these waves all throughout the interior of the earth and analyze them from those seismic stations. It's almost like they were trying to seismically outline and map the interior of the earth and see what was going on in there. And if they did potentially find something penetrating deep into the earth, they could have been using that seismic data to look for any other signs of any other regions similar to what they may have already come across. And if they found anything else, most likely to quickly identify where it was and to quickly lock it down. Because again, 41 years straight of underground nuclear explosions all over the world, creating constant tectonic movement, constant high yields of energy within the earth, constant seismic waves. We will never see this level of seismic activity ever again. It was like a massive ground penetrating radar campaign, potentially the most extensive and detailed mapping of the interior of the earth that has ever taken place. But everything seems to be pointing to some type of deeper access into the earth at the poles. The science, the seismic data that we can see is all leading there to the poles.